Hi, and welcome to Seat Meets Table, the podcast that brings people together. I am your host, Sam O'Hara Childs, and my guest today is Camilla Rose. Hi Camilla, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, Sam, thank you.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah.
I thought we could begin with a simple question. What makes a great sign?
That's a simple but kind of complicated question as
sure.
well. I mean, I think the first thing is you got to be able to read it. That's like
That's a good point.
Which is like maybe quite a simple response, but like when it comes to sign writing,
Sure.
and like being able to paint and execute a good sign, making sure
It's legible.
Yeah.
What does it say? That
what
is
does
important.
it say? That's pretty important. I'd say that's probably the primary function.
Yeah.
What makes a good sign? I think it's got to be clear and attractive, and it's got to stand out from what else is around it.
Sure.
Which is, in the world of hand-painted signs, quite often they do anyway, because you've got that personality to them.
Sure.
But I think for me, it's about not having anything too complicated, but having enough character to it. So character for me is when the sign has actually been developed from like by hand from the very beginning. So no like Google fonts, no like online computer graphics going into the sign. So straight from like pencil paper onto the sign. And then I think it will have some character to it if it's done in that traditional way, whatever happens.
What drew you to sign writing in the first place?
That's a good question. I think it was a bit of an accident how I ended up in sign writing, but it sort of made sense when I got myself there.
Sure.
So I didn't discover sign writing and then was like, okay, I'm gonna start pursuing this. I was painting murals, so I was really into public art anyway, in my late teens and early 20s. And I loved public art and murals because they were essentially, for me, they essentially are artworks, but they're on the street, so they're completely accessible, right? They're like for anyone to see. They're not in white box galleries, and they're not exclusive, and often they tell stories, and they often bring a new energy to a place. And
Definitely.
so when I fell into sign writing because I was putting typography in my murals and someone asked me to do signs, it was quite similar. Like the values I found in painting street art and murals also felt related to sign writing, in that they're public pieces of art. And even though they have this functional purpose of being a sign,
Sure.
When done in the really traditional way of like hand-drawn design, hand-painted signs, they are also pieces of artwork, and they're there for everyone to see, and they bring, I think even if you don't know that they're there, they bring something to an environment, to like your high street or your shop or your pub, that is lost in a kind of like the modern digital reproduction of plastic signs. I think they bring like a quality and like a care, I guess. I think people maybe relate to them even if they don't know why they're relating to them. So I think that's what drew me to it, that it was this kind of world of sign writing is about artworks, but it's also functional, and it serves a purpose. So it's this, it kind of crosses the world of like working in a trade, in a quite a practical trade, but also working in a very creative, like artistic world as well. And so I think that's kind of what drew me to it, and also just my artistic tendencies from very young was to be very precise and very calculated and very mathematical and do everything sort of perfectly, and nothing really had offered me a way to express myself in the art that I'd done, ever since I was little. And when I found sign writing, it was suddenly, it kind of fell into place. It was like, oh, here's this world of sort of a craft and a way of making art that's very precise. It is very practical. It's also very creative and very expressive. So it kind of met my artistic personality, I guess, in a way that other things hadn't done to that point. So that's what drew me to it, and that's kind of why it just took a life force of its own and became my business.
How do you make the signs? Methods, materials, that kind of thing?
Yeah, okay. So, well, I mean, if I kind of try and divide a job into 3 stages normally, sometimes more, but like if a client comes, so there's the design. So the design is not anything to do with painting the actual sign. This is like the development of the design and the sign. There's the practical making of the sign. So that's whether it's on wood, metal, stone, you know, there can be many different like applications. And then there's the execution of the actual painting. And then there's like the final bits like delivery and installation, which actually can be quite a big part of the job as well. So I think it all begins with the design. So when making a sign, unless the client gives me the design, I will usually work in a way where I'll have a sense of what they want, and I'll do some pencil sketches, some quick ideas, and I'll give that to them, and then we'll have a conversation, and it'll go back and forth a few times. Usually quite quickly we're like, we like this, but we want a bit of this, and we want a bit of this. And I will draw the design up to a sort of standard where I know that I can then put that into the final piece of painting. And then the actual making, often I work on wood. So depending, I mean, there's so many different signs in different places. You know, a traditional pub sign, I would get the joiner to do like a beautiful oak framed hardwood sign. I might get the blacksmith to do like iron wrought kind of bracket for it to go on. So all of these different skills go into making quite a big project, or it might just be a simple flat piece of wood, or it might be going straight onto a building that's already there. So all of these things totally depend on the project, but I guess on the biggest scale would be the woodwork. I used to do all the woodwork myself, and then I realised it was much easier to give it to someone I knew. So I work with a joiner and I work with a blacksmith on various jobs. And then once I've got my sign material, it's a case of paint. And paint is like a wormhole. There's so many different paints out there, and we live in a climate which is probably the most easily damaging for paint and wood, you know. So a lot of years experience and things going wrong is really how to make a sign that lasts. So working with the right paint. So again, like I usually have slightly different choices for different projects, but quite often it involves in like epoxy resining the wood, sealing it all in, and then putting like a primer, undercoat, top coat, either in traditional oil paint, or I'm using some of these more modern water-based paints, which are great because they're very easy. And then once you've got your painted board ready to go, you can actually do the bit that you feel like is the real job, but it's actually a very small part of it, which is to paint the sign. It's a very small part of actually the bigger process. And then that's, you know, really like what everyone relates to as signwriting is this moment where you have your, you know, beautiful long brushes and the enamel paints, and it's kind of quite romantic.
It's a montage in a film or something like that.
Yeah, and you're there with your stick and sort of
candles,
hovering off a ladder and being like, oh, isn't it lovely? The signwriter.
Nice soft lighting, music in the background.
Exactly. That's sort of like 5% of the bigger picture. But that's the last bit of the project, and everything else leads up to that moment of painting the design you've spent ages working on, and on the board that you've spent ages getting someone to help you make. And
and you're trying some things with some new materials at the moment, aren't you? Is that true? Some experimental techniques.
I've been working, so signs come in different forms, and one thing that I became interested in about 5 years ago was reverse glass gilding, which is something I use quite often in my work, which is the process of laying loose gold leaf onto the inside of glass. with a process called water gilding. You basically run water and gelatine down the glass and you lay the gold leaf on, and then you, with a series of kind of backing up the design, you kind of create a sign in reverse. But I also became interested in some of the more decorative and ornamental techniques associated with reverse glass gilding, and studied with an amazing artist who is an inspiration to pretty much everyone in the world of signwriting, called Dave Smith, who's actually based down in Torquay, which is very lucky because he's an international. People travel all the way around the world to work with him, and I got to just go down the road. And he teaches all of the reverse glass processes, which also include glue chipping. The other process is acid etching, which is using a really nasty chemical. I'm still kind of working my way around that, but it also creates a really beautiful finish. It eats away at the glass and creates a grain-like effect. So it just adds this sort of...
It's incredible detail.
Yeah, incredible detail. Very intricate
and so many
work.
different methods.
Yeah, lots of different methods. So I've been exploring that. I was lucky to get an Arts Council grant last year to focus in on those processes.
Incredible.
Yeah.
What are some of the projects you've worked on?
Okay, so I would say I've worked on, from small scale local businesses, working on, pub signs for across Plymouth. I work usually Cornwall, Devon, for small scale businesses, and they're usually quite design involved, and I'll sort of build their signs for them. And then maybe bigger commercial organisations, you'd say, like Hubbox and Cornish Orchards, and which is a different type of job because they've already got their branding. So you go in as the artist to basically paint
Work
up.
within their wheelhouse, kind of?
Yeah.
Incorporate certain colours?
You just create what they've already developed. So they have their branders already creating the artwork.
And they give it to you.
And they just give it to you to paint.
Sure.
So very different process because you're not doing all the design work. But actually, I quite enjoy it because it's a little bit of a lighter touch. I just have to go.
Sure.
I don't have to think so much.
It's not the entire beginning to end process. It's just, right, here you go, make it. There we are.
Yeah. Boats. I spend a lot of time working on boats. I also work for the Navy, which has been a bit more, been something I've been doing for quite a few years, but more recently been working. I had a job out in Gibraltar working on HMS Medway, and I'm going out to Malta to work on HMS Trent. Right. And so that's a bit of a new development because it's working in a completely different industry, and it's not necessarily creative work. It's very simple sign writing over the boat.
It's still pretty cool to be hired by them for that.
It's
how far you're going. That's a pretty big spectrum.
It's a total different world from painting the local coffee shop sign. So this is kind of what I'm saying. The spectrum is big.
Yeah.
And then another nice job I had this year, which also pushed kind of my lettering skills in a bit of a new direction, was doing some tiny nameplates for the Buckingham Palace Summer Art Show.
Wow. So
that was really nice because it was very simple, again, Roman. I say very simple, but it's actually some of the hardest sign writing because you're working with sort of 5 mil high letters and they've got to be perfect Roman. So that's kind of another world. So it changes, it moves sort of from this kind of local work to these kind of bigger, working with these bigger organisations. And I think also it means that my skills have to keep moving. So some of the jobs in the last year have definitely challenged certain lettering styles, for me to kind of really go into to make sure that I know what I'm doing, which is important.
Which is your favourite of the signs that you've made, if you could pick one? Maybe it's too hard, I don't know.
Well, there's a couple of projects that I have really loved the outcome of, the visual of the sign, and one of them was a pub which is in Crewkerne called the Crooked Swan. And I love doing pub signs because they are more than just signs, because they often have this pictorial or illustrative element.
It's kind of a story there, isn't there?
It's a story.
Because pubs are often quite old.
Yeah.
And it's about real character.
Yeah, so they're really fun to do. And I really loved how this sign, it was actually my first pub sign, and it was for a pub back up where I grew up called the Crooked Swan.
It's a good name for a pub anyway.
It's a good name for a pub.
Unusual name, you know.
And it was quite often I create signs and I sort of have a bit of as most artists do, a kind of a relationship with your work where you're like, do I like it? Do I not like it?
Sure.
I don't know how I feel about that. But this one I really liked, and I still really like, and I look at it and I think, I really like that bit. And it had this lettering which was actually inspired from the Palace Theatre down in Plymouth. Which is this amazing abandoned theatre. And if you look at the front of it, there's this wonderful, I would say, Art Deco typography saying the Palace Theatre along it. And they kind of wanted this sort of Art Deco, Art Nouveau kind of theme to it. So I got inspiration from that lettering, which is really great bit of typography. And then I got to paint this sort of swan with its crooked neck standing, wobbling on a sort of the old kind of ceramic jar. Which they would have had cider in, probably from Somerset. And it was pretty simple, and then it had this kind of Art Deco border design around it. But yeah, it was definitely a piece that I will always feel pleased with and return to, I think, to promote my work as well, because it was a great...
Well, sometimes you stumble upon them as well, or they come into existence. Sometimes you feel you've achieved a perfect representation of your art.
Yeah.
Like that time I nailed it. It does happen. Often there is ambivalence with, I'm not sure how I feel about it, but sometimes. How would you like to improve your craft?
I would like to learn how to do restoration gilding, which I've been requested more and more to do. So it's not really sign writing, but it does go in it. But it's... surface gilding to restore back to, I've had some requests in for town clocks and naval gates, and where you get these very decorative bits of not so much on the town clock, but the naval gates, decorative bits of ironwork that need gilding. And it's something that kind of very much exists alongside sign writing, but it's a skill that I'd quite like to go and do some training in how to.
Right.
It's very material based, so it's about learning how to use the materials correctly for longevity outside. I'm noticing that some projects don't give me that excitement anymore,
right?
And that I'm sort of feel like I've reached a bit of a transition stage of like, where do I want this to go?
Right.
I've developed my business and I've got this far with it in 10 years, and it's a great business and it's reliable, and I've got plenty of work, and then it's also like, okay, well, what projects really make me feel excited now? And I think a lot of it is this new working with new clients, new kind of skill sets, and yeah, I think there's sort of a bit of a desire in me to kind of explore different directions and see where that goes.
Do you think of yourself as an old soul, given you're drawn to more traditional historical practices?
Well, it's funny because when I was little, like really little, probably 4 or 5 or 6, my mum and my sister used to call me old-fashioned Pink and Rosy. And I hated it. I absolutely hated it.
You would as a child, wouldn't you?
Yeah, but it was because my mum, I think, saw me like I was from a different era. She was like, I was like this old-fashioned little girl that didn't really belong to this time.
Right.
And so I think maybe there is a part of me that is, and also it was in my childhood. I was surrounded by it. So my mum was very, she wasn't necessarily really kind of into kind of old craft or old things, but she had an old car and an old bike before I grew up, or before I was born. And then my dad was really into old stuff. So he was obsessed with Norton motorcycles and pre-war, so early 1900s. So my whole childhood was kind of surrounded by both two parents, but especially my dad, really into old-fashioned stuff, and the celebration of old engineering and the artwork that surrounded it, and the kind of culture surrounded this old stuff. So I think that I had it really in me right from the beginning, and I think that it has carried through. I think with in regards to craft, like, it's an appreciation, maybe not so much of something in the past or something that's gone by, but actually what's involved in the creation of something by hand, which we've really moved away from. Not everywhere, but we have really moved away from largely, in our modern culture. You know, everything's automated, mass produced, and I have a real, like, I'm sure this is probably other people's theory, but I have a real theory that in this world of mass production and automation and fast produce, you know, from everything, food, clothing, signs, you know, vehicles, that the way that we relate to it as people is we also move through it very quickly. We like it, and then it's gone, and then we don't care about it anymore. And this is like this culture of consumption. And I think, you know, I see that where I work down at Flameworks, which is a home of about 20 makers, and everyone, you know, pours their heart and soul and a huge amount of time into what do they create. And you look at these objects, you know, signs, pots, stained glass, whatever it is, and I think we build a relationship with them.
The objects themselves.
Yeah, that we don't build with things that have been mass produced, and we want to look after them, and we want to keep them in our lives for longer. And so I think for me, it's about things maybe pre this kind of commercial mass production era, but it's not because of the past, it's just actually because of the quality.
Sure.
And the sort of relationship of object to human that I think comes with this kind of way of creating things, making things. That is why I'm drawn to it and why I care about it.
Right. What is it like to run a business as an artist? Because those are kind of contradictions, but obviously people are doing it.
Yeah, it's hard. Like, I think to run a business full stop is hard.
Sure.
And to run a business entirely on your own, there has been moments where I've sort of flirted with the idea of getting other people involved or employing certain things out to certain people, but I do still keep it under my own kind of practice because I find it easier to manage and to be in control of everything. But it's hard because you're doing everything, you know. You are the artist, the creative, you're also the communicator with the clients, and you've got all of that going on while you're also trying to be creative. You're your finance, you know, officer, and you're trying to manage your money as well, your accounts, your marketing and promotion.
Lots of different hats.
There's so many different hats, and, you know, I think I've got to a place where I'm very lucky that it's sort of is so known to me that it runs itself, and I don't find it too challenging anymore. But it's been a journey, like, especially I think the money side of things and putting value to your artwork and asking, you know, for this exchange.
Value for quality again, that.
It can be very challenging. Like, I think a generalization, but artists aren't usually the most kind of business minded or capitalist hungry people. So to really make sure that you're asking for the value of what you're offering is like actually quite a deep personal kind of, you know, there's been moments where I've really had to kind of look deep and be like, well, if I'm going to make this work, I need to actually be able to ask for the money that reflects the time and the care I'm putting into this. Yeah. And do a lot of personal work around that, because there's been times where I've really struggled with that. And
I understand, I've been there.
Yeah. You can't just, well, as much as I'd like to, it's very hard to just disappear into the world of the imagination and creativity, which is where I'd like to exist. Sure. Totally lost at sea with my brushes.
Much more fun.
But you're always in this process of lining up the next job, you know, communicating. And I think everyone's got their different personal relationships with bringing their artwork into business, and for me it was probably more about money, also about being exposed as an artist. That everyone's going to have their different things, but I think that it's probably always going to present quite personal challenges to bring your artwork into business, and I think you have to be committed to push through, or to learn a bit about yourself to be able to do it.
The challenges for you when you first started going out into the world and creating the signs was overcoming the self-awareness, whatever it might be, of people watching you as you're making it, and the challenge of that.
It's an interesting process, and I think that I speak to quite a few people that are not necessarily sign writers, but are artists or dancers or musicians, and they come up against the same thing. But for me, before I even got into sign writing, I got into this kind of mural street kind of painting when I was about 18, 19. And I used to go up, try and start a project. This is all in public, in a busy place. And I'd be so nervous that I'd have to then try sort of paint a couple of things, and I couldn't cope with being watched.
Sure.
The fear of kind of exposing me, a raw part of me, which I guess is the art that I was creating.
Yeah.
I'd pack everything away, and I'd just do this process of bringing it all out, and it was kind of excruciating, the kind of fear and nervousness of being seen. And the same with when I started sign writing on the streets. I remember this moment of painting this sign on a busy street, everyone's watching, and again being so nervous of being watched, and I think that's a really human experience, and it's a really human experience in the creative world, because we're expressing something quite deep of ourselves. And I think I experience it now maybe more with my own personal artworks, which I haven't chatted about too much, but that there's an exposure of ourself, our quite authentic self, through our creativity.
Definitely.
And we're really in a fear of judgment, or a fear of not being accepted. A lot of in all walks of life, but that's a really acute place for it. And it's a big task to overcome that. I don't think anyone would probably. I think they'd be lying if they were just it doesn't bother me to get up and just perform in public. Maybe some people, but I think most people probably have to overcome that fear of.
Well, it's an unnatural or unusual act, isn't it? Not everyone goes onto a busy street and paints a sign while everyone's watching. What is it like to be part of the Flameworks collective?
So Flameworks is a workshop just down the road from here in Plymouth, and it is a collective of makers and artists that I found when I moved to Plymouth. I didn't have a studio here, and I was desperate to find somewhere to work from so I could move here. And then I eventually managed to get hold of a small space in Flameworks, and it's been pretty big for me actually being there. When I moved here, I didn't know anyone, and Flameworks is a wonderful place. It's been going for 20 years, and it has a turnover of people, but it also has this core of people that kind of have been there for a long time. So it has a bit of a family feel to it, and they certainly became my family, being at Flameworks, and still kind of have that space in my heart, really, the people there. And so I think being there, probably the confidence, being surrounded by different makers, being able to share and communicate and just have their friendship, enabled me to really launch my business down here and grow in confidence, in a way that probably if I just found an isolated space I wouldn't be able to do. But it's also more than that. I mean, everyone there is working in different mediums. You've got glass, you've got clay, you've got metal, you've got wood, and it's wonderful to be in a place under one roof with that variety of skill sets, and knowledge, really great knowledge of craft and making that is quite rare now, I think. So I feel really lucky to be in a collective, in a space which I can share with other makers.
Sure. Where does your inspiration come from?
Oh, that's a question that could have many answers. I think that my inspiration for actual design and kind of ideas based often comes. I look a lot at old imagery, and there's an amazing world of books out there of kind of like the old advertising art that preceded digital work.
Yeah.
When it was hand drawn or
entirely all of it.
Yeah. And so there's like an incredible catalogue of imagery to return to, and I've got my own library, and then you've got the world of online imagery, and I think I've gone back to different phases of history, and I think maybe initially I was really into the very heavily decorative kind of Georgian Victorian kind of advertising art that's all scroll and patterns and really great stuff, amazing stuff. And I think that now maybe I feel a bit more drawn to the kind of slightly more simple, modern. At the minute, I feel really inspired maybe by the more kind of scripty, cartoony. It's not something I bring into my work very often, but I really love it. This kind of cartoony, pop arty style.
You mean
of lettering.
Big and bold kind of
yeah,
thing?
bit simple, big and bold,
Right.
but really like expressive. So
Right.
Yeah, the inspiration moves depending, I think, on what I'm interested at the time. But
Do you find certain winds of inspiration come into you? Like, this phase is done, now something new.
yeah,
Sure.
definitely. Yeah, because it's also like stretching different parts of my design skill set
course,
as well.
yeah.
So I think prior to this, I've been very ornamental, very like probably too complex with my design work. And now it doesn't come naturally to strip things back, but I'm looking more and more at kind of much simpler bits of inspiration and how to strip my work back for sort of kind of simplicity but character, I think.
What advice would you give to someone starting out in the weird and wonderful world of sign writing?
Oh, yeah. I think don't get in the way of yourself. If you love it, just keep working on it. I think one thing. I think get support. Like, it's a really wonderful community, the sign writing community. It's quite international, and there's forums and there's meetups, and people are really keen to support each other. And I reached out to certain sign writers when I was starting out and had a few conversations and the right things at the right time, and it really helped. So definitely get support, reach out, and if you don't hear back, or just keep reaching out, because there are people out there that will like help guide you and give you sort of bits of advice. I'd definitely try and do a course, get a little bit of knowledge from someone that's been doing it longer than you. Really helpful. And go to the Letterheads meets up. The Letterheads is like an international convention of sign writers.
That's a good name for a sign writing convention.
Yeah, and they do great meets. And go to them and chat to people and have a go at painting. But yeah, I think just, the biggest thing is if you love it and you think that you are, you have the skills to kind of take it forward, just stick with it and go for it. Yeah. So
commitment again.
Commitment.
Just go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, within reason, if someone wants you to do something for them, get the support you need, but give it a go. Like, I think, unless it's something that, like is really, pressured, or there's too much weighing on it, maybe not for your first attempt, but, like find friends that need signs, find local businesses that are up for giving you a go. You know, just kind of get out there and get into the world of kind of practical work, where you can learn in not too much of a pressured way.
Sure.
I think it's a great
way
don't
do
start.
Caesar's Palace at Las Vegas for your first job.
No, try not to do that. Yeah, ask your friend, your mum, your auntie,
Sure.
you know, if they need something for their business, and give it a go and get support to lead you through the stages, because there's nothing like having to really set yourself in that reality of thinking, you know, it's all very well practicing at home, but thinking of all the stages through and how to bring it from, you know, something in your head to something that's going to be in a shop or on the street.
And again, focus on the fundamentals.
Yeah.
In a safe space.
Yeah.
In the home laboratory before you graduate to the next steps. What other passions do you have?
Yeah, I have quite a lot of passions. I'd say my life is quite colourful, and signwriting is just a small part of it. So, I play music. That's a big part of my life. I play the fiddle, and I have a huge love for Celtic, Irish music particularly, and I've always loved it.
Beautiful stuff.
Very beautiful music. And I have been playing with a Ceilidh band for the last few years. So we go out and do weddings and you know, go and earn a bit of cash on a Saturday night and you
Sounds
know,
like
put on a party.
Sure.
But most of all, like, we play in the pubs around Plymouth and South Devon and Cornwall, with different people. And yeah, it's funny, it kind of relates back maybe to that old soul thing. Maybe there is an element of that in that, because it is old music, and also a way of relating. I think the thing I love about it is it brings people together usually a pub, but it brings people together that don't know each other, that doesn't matter who they are or what they do, or no one really knows too much about each other, but they connect through music, and it's so magic. And it's like, for me, that's something like we need more of, like humans need more of. And folk music, I think all music has the power to bring people together, and for me, my experience of it is through folk music. And then another kind of passion, or something, I think it is a passion, it's something I seem to end up doing a lot, is projects. So I live on a boat, which I've been doing up for a number of years, and I also have old motorbikes from my father, and who sadly passed away 8 years ago, but I inherited his bug of doing up these old bikes. So I have an old Honda from 1968, which I've actually rebuilt the engine twice on. I'm still slowly bringing it up to full spec. I've combed through most of the bike, had some serious disasters along the way, but now it feels like the bike works. And so as a passion of mine is actually learning about motorbike engines, which is, my whole childhood was watching my dad build motorbikes, and I never showed much interest when he was around, which is a shame. But since his passing, I've really got into it and found like that I have my own love for learning about engines, and it suits my brain, I think, and it's something that I'd like to keep growing. Again, I've thought about there's only so much I can learn on my own, but how could I go and learn more about motorbike engineering? This boat, which I bought 8 years ago, and I bought it because I wanted a home, really. I wanted an affordable home, and I didn't want to live in conventional rentals, and didn't want to share a rental property with people, because I like being in my own world. And I bought this boat, so seemed like a good idea, seemed like an adventure, and it was an adventure. It was really bloody stressful for quite a long time, when I realised that there was water pissing in from the roof there and pissing in from the back there, and the bottom knee. Oh, so much work. I like having a project. I like having something to create, to build.
Sure.
And the boat has been a huge one, and it's still going on. And now I'm on the engine, which is also really fun. It's a bit bigger than a motorbike engine, and I find my muscles are sort of like trying to turn the engine on. I'm like, fuck, I'm not strong enough. I'm not strong enough. Having something really practical. I'm a hands person. I like to do things with my hands and use my brain in that way. And I think signwriting offers that to some degree, but also, building projects are really like satisfying for me. So and I love riding motorbikes. I love adventuring on motorbikes, and I love being on the boat. And I'm hoping that will also lead to some good adventures once I fix the engine. So maybe there's also that potential of adventure and kind of what could come with those projects.
And going back to the idea of freedom,
in
a way, as in adventure equals freedom.
I feel very free when I'm sort of riding on a bike adventure, or living on the water feels very freeing, and I'm sure taking the boat out would feel very freeing.
And for my last question, what are your 3 dream projects?
I've been thinking about this. It's a great question, and I've been thinking big, because I think
Why
for
not?
me at this at this moment,
Caesar's Palace?
there's different directions that I'm going in, and I think the first one, it's not a clear project, but I've always had this dream, and I still haven't found the answer, that I would like another kind of interest of mine, and I feel like I've lost it in a way. When I was younger, it was like go to art school or go and study politics and economics, and I went and studied politics and economics, and I'm really interested in political economy and how the world is run, power structures, everything that's to do with being a human on this earth. And I've always had this dream that somehow, because I'm a visual person and not really an academic person, but that somehow my artwork, my signwriting could meet this world of politics, whether it's through, I don't know what that looks like, but whether it's through protest, whether it's through making artwork that maybe has making signs, or artwork that
T-shirts with slogans or images, maybe. I don't know.
I think probably bigger, maybe like more public artwork that maybe...
Like a protest mural, kind of?
Yeah, maybe. Like I have had different ideas. Like I thought it would be really cool to do a bit more of a public art project where people could come and do their own protest posters, and we did a big collective mural.
Right, a collage almost, a different...
Yeah. But in some ways, bring my artwork into a world of where it also facilitates me to engage a bit more in the world of the politics, or in social issues, or things that I also care about. It's like I want to bring those two sides for myself in a project.
Sure.
But I still haven't found the answer to what that might look like yet.
Right. But that'd be an interesting confluence.
It would be and it would be a bit of a dream. It would be somehow, that would be like something I've been trying to work towards my whole life. So I think that would be a bit of a dream. But
right.
I think another dream project, I've been doing another personal project which I haven't talked about, which has been actually really related to motorbikes. And I have been using old imagery from early 1900s Norton British motorcycling, like the lettering and the diagrams, and I've been bringing those images to life in reverse glass art in Glassworks. And so I think a bit of a dream project would be maybe to be commissioned by maybe Norton, as they are now, to do a great, amazing piece of glasswork once my skills are up to scratch, that, could sit in their headquarters or their museum.
That'd be incredible.
That would be a cool project.
Yeah. You kind of would have completed life then, in a way.
I would have completed some passion and some part of my...
But that would be
my
monumental for you, honouring your father as well.
Yeah, exactly.
All kinds of things.
Yeah, so that would be a bit of a dream project that, who knows, that might be down the line. I would love to bring my signwriting into a world of sculpture. So I've had this idea where, so again, moving a little bit away from the functional role of signwriting, but I've always had this dream of working on like metal sculpture, maybe even old objects, maybe even old military objects, or like using signwriting and lettering and storytelling, through signwriting, color, but bringing them onto sculptural forms and having that as public pieces of artwork.
So the sign is a sculpture, almost.
There's a sculpture with sign embodied. Yeah, so the sign is a sculpture, basically.
The sign follows the shape of the sculpture.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I could see that.
And creating public bits of artwork. That would be a bit of a dream. So it's like, again, moving a little bit away from the formality of the sign, but still keeping within street public art, and bringing what is mostly a 2D practice into, I don't know, I just have this imagination that it could be on a curved big kind of form. And
I can see it quite clearly how that would work.
Yeah, it's an idea that's been there for quite a number of years. So.
And you've been, I guess, mostly two-dimensional so far.
Yeah.
It would be, how do you go into that third dimension?
Yeah.
Or beyond?
Yeah, exactly.
That would be a big challenge.
Yeah.
And test your skills.
Yeah.
Well, great. Thanks for talking.
That's all right. Thank you for having me, Sam. It's been really good.
Excellent. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe, rate, slate, comment, cavil, share, suppress, whatever you like. And stay tuned for more fantastic interviews with brilliant guests. Hasta luego.